everybody, welcome to CMN103, Introduction to Creative Industries. My name is Gail Crimmins and today I am joined by Retha Scheepers once again. So welcome back.
Thanks, Gail.
I hope you all had a good week. So today we're going to be talking about, well, we're assuming that you now have an idea or that you have started to develop an idea. And we're moving that forward then to how would you market your idea or ideas? Have you got any strategies that you might be able to support us with?
Yeah, so I think the hard thing about a new idea is that actually nobody knows about it. If it's really, really new, then you often have to almost educate people about it before. If it's just new because it's new to you, there are other people doing it, then obviously you need to put your name out there. And that's hard because you can kind of, if you go up to people and you ask them almost like in a survey, then they might be happy to say things that you want to hear, but they may not actually behave in that way.
Yeah.
So that's really hard. People might say, oh yeah, all right, I'm interested, I would pay X amount for this, and that's actually a really, really poor test. So market research that's based on surveys for a new idea is really bad.
Okay.
Market research. You don't really want to trust that. You really want to go out and either watch what people are doing now, or test your particular idea. So if you are a creative artist, then there are maybe different ways that you can test this depending on where your area of creativity lies. So if it is something online, you might be able to test it there in a group or in a page or something. If it is something which people need to experience, then try out a festival or a pre-show. If it's something that can be recorded, record that and try it out with people. So just find out, ask yourself, what's the smallest part of this that I can make so that people can get a taste of what I'm thinking of doing, and really see how they behave around that, because their behavior is a much better indicator of what might happen in future than what they say on a survey.
So this reminds me of those, when you go to I'm not going to name brands, but you go to a particular or a series of large supermarkets, and they have a stall set up with some tasters.
Yeah.
And I've got young children. They have to go and try everything. And of course you oh yes, you do a lot of nodding, yes, lovely, as if you're going to buy that particular yogurt or mousse or biscuit or whatever it is. But in actual fact, in my actions, it doesn't drive me to purchase it. Even if the kids have said, yeah, that's really yummy, they say that anything that's sweet is really yummy. It's true. It doesn't translate to my actions. So you're right, I might gesture and say yes, and say what the person behind the little kind of counter or stand wants me to say, which is, yes, your produce is lovely and I'll certainly be buying some. But you get to the till and I don't have that in my trolley.
Yeah, so you have to be really careful with the guilt factor.
Yeah.
Don't ask your grandma. Don't ask your mom.
Yeah.
They're going to like you anyway, regardless. So you need to go out there in the big bad world to people who probably don't know you and who are going to be honest about it.
And watch the actions.
So I think I may have told you this story before, Gail, but I was actually helping a young girl that was still in school trying to set up a business, and she was wanting to sell watches because she herself had bought these watches. She thought they were beautiful, they weren't too ornate, they weren't too expensive. She could kind of import them from China and sell it through a website. And in her project, when she was talking to all her girlfriends, they just loved it.
Yeah.
But then when it came to buying it, none of them bought it. And when she asked, so who bought your watch, she realized that it's either their parents or their boyfriends that had bought them watches. And her whole market was actually the people who would buy these watches would be either boys who wanted to buy something nice for their girlfriends or wanted something for themselves, or parents. So they were very different, the market initially, from what she thought they would be to who were actually buying these watches. So it's a very simple kind of example.
So I'm a bit naive about this now because I'm not a marketer. And who do you pitch to then? Do you have to pitch to both the person that would like it as a gift, as well as the person who's going to be buying it? Or?
I think in a previous conversation we talked about failing, right?
Yeah.
So if we take that and bring it back into this, in this particular example, so her first assumption was a fail, and when she started to chat to people, she realized, oh no, I need to go further. This is actually what's happening. So your research is really valuable if it's talking to people.
Nice.
It's very, very powerful, and you don't need to send some kind of survey and struggle with some kind of online forms or stuff. Just really talk to people and ask them about what they've done to date. Past behavior is a pretty good indicator, like you're saying. You go to the shop, you make all the nice noises, but then no, kids, let's go back to the shopping list.
I don't have to buy them because they've eaten so much from the county. That's their sweets for the day. They go home and say, can I have a Tim Tam? You say, no, you've had your sweets for the day. You've had all those free samples. Anyway, sorry, probably a bit too much information. So tell me about this kind of concept of the market curve as well.
Right, so actually this goes back to our idea of when you're new in the market. So if people don't know about you, you actually have got no following, no audience, no customers at all. So there's this thing in marketing called the adoption curve, and it kind of looks like almost like a hat, I guess, with brims to the side, and we call this a normal distribution curve. If any of you have ever had stats, so what that shows is that curve really shows that in the beginning there are very few people, or it's really only people who are very adventurous that might try a new product. And so actually the guys who are gamers watching this will probably know about this. So when you've got a new game, there's probably people who are who are really into gaming that will try the game first. And they will almost be very happy to make some suggestions to the game developer on how to make this better, because they're really excited to be in this early stage, and we call them innovators. The next group of people that might try it out are opinion leaders. So opinion leaders will write about the game, the movie, whatever, and they'll recommend that other people, buy or use it. So they're kind of the early majority, what we call them. And then after that, we've got the late majority, the next group. So the point for you guys is when you're starting out with a new idea, you've got to figure out, are there other people doing what I'm doing? How new is this idea? Who am I pitching it to? And if your first group of people are innovators are really different from opinion leaders. Opinion leaders are telling the rest of the market what to buy. But innovators are often the ones that will ditch this thing when it goes mainstream, and they'll go look for the next new thing. So you've got to realize that the group of people that will like what you're doing will change if you kind of get more and more of them.
Okay, so you're really wanting to pitch to those early adopters and those innovators, is that right?
Yeah, you've got to figure out where your particular project sits. How new is it? If it's really, really new, like never existed before, then it's innovators. If it's something that people are quite used to consuming and you want more people to watch it, then you might trying to... People do this all the time with influencers, right? You guys would know Instagram influencers, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to get an influencer to say, yay, this is a good thing, and then that will spill over to the rest.
Okay, good. So you've got a product, you've done a bit of research, I'm talking to people, watching behaviours, considering past behaviours. You're now ready to pitch or to tell your story. What tips or what advice would you give us in terms of that?
So the reason why we call it a pitch, if you think about the Americans, right, it's like a ball that you're throwing out there and you're hoping someone will catch it.
Yeah, okay.
So that's this whole thing of pitching, right? You are actually throwing your ideas out there and you're hoping someone will catch it and think it's a great idea and play with you. So when you are pitching, you are not like doing university where we sort of try and force you to write things and remember things.
We don't force you.
You're really trying to persuade people.
Yeah.
You're trying to get them to be as enthusiastic about your show or your music or your design, whatever you've made, as you are. Yeah. So when you're pitching something, you need to remember that your purpose is to persuade, not to inform. That's the first thing. That's the kind of mindset you need to get into.
So to persuade somebody, how do you persuade them? And what's the difference between persuading and informing?
Informing, you will often explain a whole lot more. You'll give a lot more information. With persuading, you're trying to say to them, look, what I've got is super valuable. So you'd be using a lot more emotive language. People are persuaded often by stories. Yeah. So you might know like all the reasons, you might know the 10 best things about what it is that you're doing. Technically, if you're sort of a game designer, I guess you might go into all the technical reasons why this work well, or if you're a graphic designer, you might talk about the DPI of resolution of images. I'll tell you honestly, that doesn't turn me on. I don't care about the resolution. Is it beautiful? Yeah. Does it catch me? Does it grab me? So if you're doing persuasion, you need to tap into people's emotions, not their logic or reason. Yeah. We raise objections with our logic or reason. We often buy things through emotion. You kind of get to people because you're making an emotional connection with them. So that's the big challenge if you're pitching. How do you make that connection?
And tapping into people's values. You know, so sort of assuming that somebody has a certain set of values and linking a story that has emotion and values and things. I remember once, in a past life, some of you will have undertaken Core 109. In a past life, Core 109 didn't used to have an oral presentation, it used to have a debate. So we'd have 3 students on one side for the affirmative team, and we'd have 3 students on the opposite side, and they would be the negative team, and obviously they'd alternate between speakers. And we'd give them, various topics to debate on. We changed them every semester, and one of the topics was about distribution of healthcare funding, and I can't even remember it clearly, but I remember there being a finite amount of funding available, and therefore we should not be funding healthcare for people over a certain age. It was really quite controversial, and somebody stood up and they gave a really, really logical discussion and breakdown of funds, and it was full of stats. And it was talking about the percentage of newborns, percentage of adolescents, people between this age, and all right the way through the demographic, and how much healthcare costs was distributed, and basically saying that these people over the age of 90 have already had this really rich, fulfilled life. Really, when you've got young babies that need financial support, this is where the money should go. But it was really quite technical and quite statistic based. And the next person that stood up that was rebutting that particular line of argument told the story of her grandfather. And I remember the story now, and this is going back, I don't know, 7 years. She told the story of her grandfather, and her grandfather at that point was in his 90s, and she talked about how he had served for his country in the war, how he had lost one leg, and how he had returned from war and still worked and contributed for his family. And even in his later years, in his 80s and right the way through to his early 90s, he was working in a voluntary capacity for his local Lions Club, etc. And she was talking about how rich his contribution had been, physically, emotionally, to his community, to his family, financially, etc. And how he also had a particular health condition, and how costly his medication was, but how he had earned that. And because she enveloped her narrative in this story, in this very compelling story with a very rich and clearly defined character, she won the debate, because emotion trumps logic every time. And so if you want somebody to support your idea and to part with their money or to invest in some way, They need that story, don't they? They need that connection in some way. And I think stories and emotions connect far more than statistics and information.
Yeah, we actually, the thing is to grab people's attention initially, you do need that story. But you can have some statistics.
Yeah.
I mean, they are valuable, right? And especially if you're going to ask for money or something, you will have these people who don't part easily with their money, so they may need some more logic. But essentially, to first get them interested, you need to have a story. There's actually a great local entrepreneur who is developing a range of skincare products. But the reason he's working on this, he starts off by telling a story about his sister who died of skin cancer by the age of 32. And suddenly, he's not just selling a range of skincare products. He really cares about this. You can see he's made this his life's mission because of that story. And it's a story that's really short and simple to tell, yet compelling.
It builds in an authenticity, doesn't it?
Yeah,
we
it does.
believe in him, and so we believe in the product that he's marketing because he's given us a reason to believe in him.
And it's very personal. And he's kind of a private guy. So yeah, absolutely. So that's probably what you've got going for you when you start out, more than a Coca-Cola or a Nike or a big brand.
Max.
Right, yeah, whatever. The thing is that what you've got is who you are. And that essentially that people will engage with you because of your personalness or your credibility, your authenticity. People are really looking for that.
Yeah. So don't try to be anything other, I think is what we're trying to say here. It'll wear thin, we will see through it, people will see through it, we won't buy the idea because we don't believe in your authenticity. So holding on to that is really important. So in terms of pitching then, do you have any particular...
Yeah, so I have it depends on how long you've got, right?
Okay.
So there's sort of like a 1 minute pitch, the so-called elevator pitch, and then there's one that you probably a bit longer. So the 1 minute pitch is firstly just saying your idea. So come up with a catchy name for your idea. Start off with that, and then say, this is who I am, this is my name, whatever, and then you go, oh, there's a problem. Tell us about the problem. Now, the problem you can outline in whichever way you want. A story, like we've said, is very powerful, but sometimes a fun fact, have you ever experienced this problem, can be a nice way to engage. And then, wait for it, you've got the solution, right?
Yeah.
So the problem is like 10, 15 seconds, then you've got your solution is 10, 15 seconds, and then you outline how you're going to do it. And that gives you a nice 1 minute.
Yeah.
A wrap, and then sort of at the end go, I'd love your feedback. It's me from Wacky Tunes, or whatever it might be, that whatever your idea might be. So that's kind of the nice 1 minute pitch. If you've got a bit of longer time and you're really probably asking for a bit more, then you can build it a little bit out, a little bit more.
But structurally, still identifying the problem, still identifying the solution, and then what you can offer in terms of the solution?
Yeah, so you would probably, if you have a bit longer time, you'd still talk about the problem and solution. You probably have a bit longer to talk about the problem. You can now do the emotion and the logic.
Yes.
You can really go into why your solution is great.
And your point of difference, how your solution is perhaps different from somebody else's that's available?
Yeah, that's right, because often you won't have something that's radically new. You might have something that's slightly new, so how yours is better than what else is out there. Also, who is it for? Talk about people that are maybe currently using it. What do people tell you? And then build out your market definition so that people will be like, oh yeah, you know what you're talking about. You actually... The example of the girl that we talked about earlier, how she would say, oh, these are the people using it and these are the people buying it. So this is where I know about my target market.
Okay, good. So showing that you've done that bit of homework.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And also sometimes it can be quite engaging in a pitch to say what you thought and now what you now know. It shows that you've learned out of your past mistakes. That also adds to that authenticity.
It's interesting. I'm just picking up on something that you said then. You were talking about that usually what you're offering is not absolutely brand new, that there might be an element of it that your audience will already be familiar with. And I think that it came from you, I think that it was from a conversation that we've had in the past. You were talking about if you're using an application, for example, rather than teaching somebody what they have to do, if they're already familiar with the technique through a previous exposure, you make reference to it. So for example, you might say, oh, it's like Tinder, except, you know, if you want somebody to swipe through the application, you give an analogy or you make reference to something that they're already comfortable and familiar with, because you're saying, look, this is not all crazy brand new. This element of it is really novel and creative and new, but you'll understand how to do it because you're already familiar with some of the application, for example.
Yeah, people do that all the time, right? They go, oh, it's like the Uber for dogs, or it's like the Airbnb for social entrepreneurship, or whatever. You know, people do that all the time. So bringing that, like what's familiar to people, to your idea, and people go, oh, yeah, right, I get that.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel too outlandish.
Yeah, too far away.
Yeah, because you've got to make sure that it's novel enough for people to think that this is creative and exciting, but familiar enough that you're taking some of the risk from them, I think.
Yeah, that's right. So, because if you're trying something new as a consumer, it's often that like, oh, am I going to like it? Is this going to be good for me? Whatever.
Okay, so I think that we've kind of covered everything that we'd like to talk about today. Did you have any final take-home messages for the students in terms of marketing and pitching their ideas? Yeah,
I think perhaps in terms of the pitch, if you guys are kind of watching Dragon's Den or Shark Tank, right? Australia is around now. If you have a look, that's kind of what your pitch is like. They obviously, it's edited for dramatic effect and all of that, but they are really sharing the problem, the solution, what they've done and what they've been able to achieve up to now, who's the competitors. But when you ask those sharks, they say, why did you invest? Often enough, they'll say, it's about the person, not the idea. So it's really important if you pitch as an individual or as a team that you talk about what brought you to this idea, why are you doing it, and why it will be successful. And that being real, being yourself, that's really important.
That's fantastic. Okay, thanks very much, Retha. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Gail.
And we'll see you next week. Okay, take care. Thanks.